Alright boys, today we're going to take a look at the Z890 Hero, which is on Intel's next generation socket, and we're also going to take a look at the new DDR5 CU-Dimm 8000 MHz. So this box right here is called an Asus media package, right? Which I didn't even know existed until just now. So then what this is, Asus sends this over to reviewers, influencers, whoever they want, honestly. And what's inside are a whole bunch of like next generation components that are kind of designed to work together to showcase the next gen platform. Which is insane that they go all out and give you this cool custom box, because you guys know me, I love my boxes. So I'm keeping this bad boy as a souvenir. So what comes in the box? Well, you guys probably already know from the title and the intro. Now the 285K performance embargo is going to be up on October 24th, I believe. So what I'm allowed to show you guys is kind of how the platform works, how the motherboard features are going to work, PCIe lane bifurcation. We're going to go over all of that stuff. And I'm also allowed to disassemble one of the RAM sticks. Basically, my goal for this video is to give you guys as much possible information as I can so that you know what to pre-order, when to pre-order it, or if this platform is for you. So the first thing that comes in the media kit, Z890 Hero, we will be covering this in depth. Second thing that comes in the media kit is the new Ryujin 3 Extreme from Asus. So this is a brand new cooler that Asus is also launching to go along with the new Intel socket. But I'm going to do a separate video on this AIO because I also have the new Strix LC3. And basically, these are both kind of LCD AIOs, right? But the main differences are this is using an Asetek Gen 7 pump, and this one is using an Asetek Gen 8 V2 pump. And this one, the new Ryujin, is apparently has a modified cold plate from Asetek that works better with LGA 1700 and LGA 1851 sockets, right? So that's going to be the next video after this one. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, because we're going to have to test both of these coolers on a stock IHS, check out the temperatures, see how they perform, and then we're going to test them both on a lapped IHS to see if actually this one is better on a stock CPU, to see if you can maintain your warranty and get good performance without having to lap your IHS, right? Now, when you turn the box around, there's a secret compartment. It's just, man, I vibe with this so hard because I just love unique boxing, right? But there's a secret compartment here, and when you open her up, you got two more little things. Now, the first thing is this ROG Performance Thermal Paste Kit. I'm going to do this with the AIO videos as well, but just to quickly show you guys what this is. Yeah, you get the thermal paste, which is cool. We can always do thermal paste testing, right? But it comes with thermal paste stencils. Yeah, you heard that right. Now, I haven't tested these myself yet, but basically there's a stencil for AMD CPUs and Intel CPUs, and then you put the thermal paste in the holes here, you peel off the stencil, and apparently what it's supposed to do is give you the exact amount of thermal paste that you're supposed to use every single time. So we're gonna test that too in the AIO video. Now, the last thing in the box here, and the other thing that we're gonna cover in this video, are these Kingston Fury. They're called CU-Dimms. The CU part stands for clock unbuffered, I believe. Basically, it's kind of like generation 1.5 of DDR5. Not to be confused with CAM2 modules. We're going to take one apart later, and I'm going to show you why this is different than original DDR5 sticks. So let's talk about the motherboard first, and Z890 as a platform as a whole first. Now, the Z890 Hero is an LGA 1851 socket, very similar to 14th Gen 1700 socket, not quite the same. This one is for the Core Ultra, I don't even know what they call it to be, the Core Ultra 2 series. Now, upon first glance, this new Hero motherboard has the same kind of design aesthetic as the X870E one. I just did a video on that one a couple of videos ago, and if you saw that video, you know what I'm gonna say next. It is great to see that this motherboard has those NitroPath DIMM slots. The NitroPath DRAM slots are an Asus exclusive feature for this generation, but basically, long story short, it lets you run higher memory speeds on 4 DIMM motherboards. So for this motherboard specifically, I'll find out what the max memory speed is on launch day for the review video. I was able to hit 8000 megahertz without using CU-Dimms on the X870E Hero, so I am very hopeful for this one that it can at least do minimum 8000. But assuming, let's say that this motherboard does do 8000, and let's say the Extreme does 8000 as well, well, this might be the first generation of motherboards where we can have our cake and eat it too. What I mean is, usually when you buy 2 DIMM motherboards like the Apex, they don't come with like nice LCD screens and a lot of the nicer features, you know what I'm saying? So there's always been this conundrum of, do I go with a max overclocking motherboard and have none of the bells and whistles, or do I go with a bells and whistles motherboard but sacrifice performance? Hopefully this gen, we get both. So as you can tell, we focus a lot on memory speeds on this channel, but with the NitroPath DIMM slots out of the way, the next thing that we're gonna look at, well, not look at, but just as an observation, good God, look at the VRM on this thing. It's ridiculous. So the reason why there are so many VRMs and such massive heat sinks on this motherboard is because this one supports 3 Gen 5 NVMe drives. So what Asus did on this one is they actually added their own voltage converter. Long story short, this pin right here, this PCI Express 8 pin over here, you plug this one in. This one will power the Gen 5 NVMe drives that you put on the board. And basically the idea here is, instead of it pulling power from the 24-pin connector over here, it's going to convert the power from 12 volts to, I think it's 3.3 or 5 volts, I'm not too sure, but it uses these VRMs down here to convert that voltage for the N.2 drives. So let's say, for example, you're loading up 3 Gen 5 T705s all at once, and you're pulling like 60 watts of power. It's not going to reduce your stability by going that route. If you're a gamer, what I just said means absolutely nothing for you. But if you are a workstation user, that might be an important feature you'll want to look at. I don't know of any workloads that would actually max out like 4 or 5 drives all at once, but hey, I'm sure there are some out there, and this board's got you covered if that's you. Speaking of workstation use cases, just like I was saying on that X870E Hero motherboard video, we got a slim SAS connector right here, baby. Now, what you'll see online is support for 60 terabyte drives, support for more SATA drives. It's always like drive expansion. Baby, let me tell you, this port right here has way more use cases. You can buy this little daughter board gizmo off Amazon, and you plug this bad boy in right here, like so. Clips right in. Now, you got an extra PCI Express Gen 4 slot wherever the hell you want it. So because Asus included this slim SAS connector here on both of the motherboards, the Hero motherboard is kind of starting to become like a hybrid motherboard or an all-in-one motherboard. It's not specifically gonna be for workstation users, and it's also probably not gonna give you max FPS because it's not a 2 DIMM, right? But with the inclusion of the NitroPath DIMM slots and the slim SAS connector, well, now you have insane signal integrity on your memory slots, and now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 PCIe slots, and you have 3 Gen 5 slots. So yeah, this might legit be the first time you can have your cake and eat it too, and have second breakfast after.
What about second breakfast?
Now I'm going to take a second to explain the NVMe drives, the PCIe lanes, and the bifurcation. Why? Because this is where people make the most mistakes, and this is also where I get the most questions. So if you go on the Asus website, it will tell you that if you populate any of the bottom 2 Gen 5 slots, it will cut the top PCIe slot here down to 8 lanes. Now this next part is going to be specific to the Hero motherboard itself, but the new platform here, the 285K, the Core Ultra series, Intel did add another 4 Gen 5 CPU lanes for NVMe's. So that's usually going to be the very first slot on most motherboards. On the Hero here, it's going to be with your quick disconnect one, right? And also the one with the biggest heatsink on it, because Gen 5 drives are insanely hot. But first slot here, Gen 5, 4 lanes straight to the CPU. Now, if we take this middle plate off here, there we go, you get a lot more NVMe drives. The second one here is going to be 4 Gen 4 lanes directly to the CPU. Now, these 2 top slots here, if you populate these 2, they will not take away PCI Express lanes away from your graphics card slot. Now, it's the next 2 that you want to be aware of, right? These 2 here are both Gen 5, but if you populate a single one, it will take 8 lanes away from the PCI Express slot up here. Just because 12 lanes doesn't exist. It's either 8 or 4, right? Which honestly, I never understood that. Why isn't there 12 lanes? That'd be sick. Give your graphics card 12 lanes and then give your NVMe drive 4. But it just doesn't work that way. It's either 8, 16, or 4. So this was actually a platform upgrade by Intel, because on Z790, if you populated the Gen 5 slot, it would just rob 8 lanes and you couldn't put a second NVMe drive in there. Now, the next question you might have is, why did Asus put the Gen 5s below the Gen 4? I'm actually super glad they did this. Let me explain why. You gotta understand that when most people build PCs, they don't look at instructions. Let's be real, right? Okay. But what would always happen during my consults with old COD bros and stuff, let's take the old Z790 Apex, for example. The top slot here, the NVMe slot, is the Gen 5 slot. And man, I'll tell you, 80% of COD bros, when they would call me, they would always have this one populated, and then 8 lanes would be robbed away from their graphics card, because they always assume put it in the top slot, right? So theoretically, even if somebody were to populate the 2 top slots, these ones are dedicated CPU lanes, not shared with the 16 from the graphics card. So that was a really smart move. Now the last 2 slots here, this is a Gen 4x1 and a Gen 4x4. These 2 slots run through the chipset. They do not interfere at all with the top slot. And then these 2 slots over here are Gen 4x4. They run through the chipset, so they also do not impact the top PCIe slot. These 2 will have a little bit more latency because they go through the chipset, but if you really need 16 lanes to your graphics card for some reason, you can use these 2 and these 2, leave these 2 blank, and you still got 4 drives with 16 lanes going to your GPU. This is kind of why HEDT platforms died off a little bit. The flexibility of this platform is just, like, look at this. Now, as with the X870E Hero, right, that motherboard has a external clock generator so that you can overclock the 3D chips. The Z890 Hero here kind of has all of the same / similar features. The 285K, or I should say the Core Ultra series, is a chiplet architecture, and it's got like an NPU chip, it's got the CPU cores, IO, what have you, right? This motherboard supports having separate clock generators for each one of those different overclockable components. Now, whether or not that does anything, I have no idea. It's just that this motherboard does have the capability to overclock the AI NPU chip separately. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we move on to the actual memory sticks themselves is something called DIMM fit. I read about something called DIMM fit in the media presentation material from Asus, And basically what they say it does is it will like customize the training procedure on your specific memory sticks, and the process can take up to like 6 hours. Now, I'm not exactly sure what it does, but what I'm assuming basically what it's supposed to do is do all the FAFO for you. For those of you that have been with us on the DDR5 journey, you guys know it can take up to like 2 weeks of FAFOing with those voltages to find the sweet spots. You know what's interesting? The fact that it takes like 6 hours for that process to run in the background while AI is doing its thing does make a lot of sense, because if it takes me 2 weeks, maybe AI can figure it out in 6 hours, right? But honestly, it's great to see Asus really trying to make like memory stability a very high focus on this generation of motherboards. As we all saw, DDR5 stability on Intel platforms was an utter disaster last generation, so I'm sure it's not good for them either. They probably had thousands of RMA motherboards for DDR5 instability when they could have fixed the problem at the source by making it just work, right? Speaking from personal experience, having done consults, sold Max OC bundles, what have you, let me tell you, if the product doesn't just work, if the user has to do any troubleshooting or do any kind of what have you, they will return the product. Having put so much focus on memory stability this generation just benefits everybody. And then on top of that, they are going to be supporting the CU-Dimms, which has a clock driver on the sticks themselves to enhance the integrity of the signal. It's like the whole ecosystem is like, boys, we gotta fix this DDR5 shit. Now, before we go on to the sticks themselves, one last thing I forgot to mention in my X870E Hero video. This motherboard has it too, and that one does. It's like an AIOC data logger. I can't turn on the motherboard in this video today, but I'll show you guys how it works in the review video. But basically what it does is it will tell you how much voltage has gone into your chip over a span of time. So where that can come in handy is, let's say you are the type of guy that likes to do that single core boost shit. Okay, cool. What you can actually do then to kind of protect yourself is, let's say you do per core overclocking and you do 10 volts into one core and you got that 10 gigahertz going in the one preferred core. Well, the AIOC can actually data log how often that one core is getting that much voltage, how much that one core, what the temperature is, and the current draw over a span of time. So then you can actually data log how often your CPU is spiking up and then kind of make a judgment call and be like, that's probably going to degrade my CPU over the long haul. Again, I'll show you guys all that stuff when the embargo is up, and then we'll see if it's actually a good feature to utilize when troubleshooting a PC or not. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about in today's video, and also more of a platform upgrade, not just for the Hero, are going to be CU-Dimms. So these sticks actually came with the media kit, the Kingston Furies here, and It's funny because it doesn't actually say the timings on them anywhere, but but I can kind of look at the part number here. 1.45 volts, and then it says 82C40 24. So 24 gigabyte sticks, looks like maybe 8200 C40. And then it says ES, so that's engineering sample. So what I'm assuming the goal is here with providing media with these sticks is to give Intel or the 285K the best light that it can be shown in. So if these work at 8200 and it just works with the nitro path and the dim fit and all the features that they all kind of bundled together, now all of a sudden you got tech reviewers that can actually run 8200 without knowing how to overclock a BIOS screen for 2 weeks, right? And yeah, 8200 C40 at 1.45 volts makes sense, right? Although at 1.45 volts on 24 gigabyte sticks, these are going to be very hard to cool. One thing I really do like about Kingston sticks though, is they do provide 2 screws here on the end. So if you do take it apart, you can put it back together with double-sided thermal tape. Which is actually what we're going to do right now because I want to see what die these are, and I want to explain to you guys what the CKD driver module actually is. Now, I actually got to see the CKD driver last year at CES when I was talking to the Patriot booth there with Shannon. He was showing me all of their prototypes for that kind of stuff. The concept for the CKD driver does make a lot of sense, right? It basically just adds a signal booster at the very end of all those memory traces to give it a little bit of a oomph. Now, I'm only going to take apart one of the sticks because I want to see, how the stick performs stock out of the box, right? Because 1.45 volts is quite hefty for 24 gig sticks. What I'm thinking actually happened, if you guys remember, when the 14900K launched, Intel was advertising that it could do 8,000 megahertz and all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of Intel slides that said 8,000 megahertz supported. And I believe that might have backfired over the long haul because, other than maybe my channel was the only channel, like a review channel, that got 8,000 megahertz working properly for benchmarks, right? So by providing media these CKD modules, now those tech reviewers don't have to learn how to FAFO, right? That's also me not talking shit. That's more just a theory of mine and why I think they provided these sticks to tech reviewers. And there you go, and there you have it. So the ICs themselves are just regular old M die, right? So nothing special with these. They're gonna basically have the exact same voltages, same timings as non-CKD sticks. Here's your PMIC. This is the voltage regulator for the sticks. And this little guy here is the clock redriver. So the signal comes in through these contact points here, through the motherboard. They come into this thing, and this spreads the signal over to all of the memory sticks. So that little bit extra distance is covered by this thing. And just for reference, this is a normal DDR5 stick. You can tell here that it doesn't have that little redriver chip right in the middle. It's just an empty spot there, right? So that is the difference between the two chips. You know what else we can try? Let's go try putting this in an old Z790 platform and see if it boots. So this is a Z790 Hero. The memory stick fits in just fine. It's the same form factor, right? It's the spacing of the actual memory slot is not any different. Oh shit, look at that, it's turning on. I was not expecting that. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. Oh, nah, see, so it got stuck on 4F here on the post. So it almost made it though, it got to 55, and then I got stuck on 4F, right? So I actually asked for clarification if CU-Dimms will work on older platforms. Now, it's a tricky answer. The word is support, right? And work. So when new BIOS updates come out and new microcode updates come out, the CU-Dimms will work in older DDR5 platforms. And when I say work, it'll probably just bypass the CKD and it will act like a normal memory stick. Again, that's a pure rumor on my part. CKD modules might not end up being supported on older platforms whatsoever. But the fact that it almost made it to the end of the training sequence does tell me that at the very least, they will work but bypass the CKD, right? So then what can you expect with these new sticks? Well, basically what the goal is of the CKD driver is it will just kind of move the lowest hanging fruit over to the voltage of the sticks and the temperature max limits. So when buying memory kits, it might end up being a little confusing. So let's say this is an 8200C40 kit, 1.45 volts. There could be an identical non-CU-Dimm kit for sale with the exact same voltages and the exact same timings, right? So now my theory on what's going to end up happening in the future is people aren't going to be erroring because of signal stability. They're going to be erroring because of overheating, right? Because every PC out there is going to have top exhaust. So hopefully we do actually see a resurgence of that Corsair RAM fan or other vendors kind of RAM fans where you can slip them over the top and get active airflow over the memory sticks. Because if you rely on case cooling, anything more than 1.4 volt on MDI, yeah, you're going to have some problems. And another interesting thing, I'm not sure if the CKD driver will actually add heat to the PCB as well. So these may in fact actually run hotter than the non-CKD variants. Again, a lot of theories, ifs, and or buts in this video, but it's all just hypothetical, guys. That was a shit ton of explaining, but the theory overall is, for the end user that just plays games, this platform is looking very promising because what essentially they're trying to do is make everything just work. Now, if you're a tweaker and a hardware enthusiast, this platform looks complicated as shit. If you enjoy your BIOS screens more than your gaming loading screens, then this might actually be a very fun platform for you. There's like 30 different fabrics to tweak, 30 different voltages. You got a new, not memory standard, but a new redriver to help you hit higher memory speeds. Hardware bros love those bigger numbers, right? So again, this whole thing might just be have your cake and eat it too. Anyway, guys, my goodness, I hope you learned something in this video because there was a shit ton of information in this one. Now, all the features that we talked about in this video, I will make a follow-up video after the embargo date is up, or we might even just do it live so we can kind of tweak and FAFO together, and that might be pretty fun. Kick.com, Twitch.com, Saturdays, 12 p.m. Pacific time. And thanks again to Asus for supplying the media kit. It's honestly so cool to be involved in something like that, especially for a channel my size, right? So I'm definitely appreciative that Asus thought my channel was valuable enough to be included in something like this. Very, very, very appreciative. And don't forget to subscribe. We have some Asetek cold plate testing to do, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Talk to you later. Also, no RGB on these sticks? Come on!